Hello, everybody. Welcome to the stream. Welcome to the show. It is that time once again. And we had some really interesting things go down today, Brandon. We had some really interesting things happen today.
It was a ride. It was a ride, Brendan. We went up and down and left and right and 90-degree turns. It was all over the place.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're done now. All the moves have been made. It's all in the books. We know what's going on. Everybody's made their picks. And, oh, excuse me. Um, I think that we're all kind of there are it seems like that there are a lot of Seahawks fans who kind of had a little bit of tunnel vision going into this draft around a few players. And now that the picks have been made, they're able to look at the players that we actually got. And I think some of them even admitted they had not had a really good chance to look at some of these guys because they weren't really on their radar. So you had the initial reaction, which was pretty strong and in many cases, I think negative. And, just because it wasn't what people were expecting or people were anticipating. And then they get a little bit of time to look at the guys, go a little bit deeper, actually see what they do. And they start to realize, okay, I see what's going on here. Is that kind of the sense that you got from your chat tonight?
I definitely had a lot of people as the chat went through that felt like that would say multiple times over, the longer this goes on, the more better I feel about it, or the more I understand it. For those that were maybe a little down on the picks, as you say, to begin with. And I do think that there was probably ultimately a little bit larger of a contingent that were a little bit not out on the picks, but definitely down on the picks immediately after they were made. For those reasons you said, I think that's valid.
So let's talk about the way that the day went. Let's kind of go through it as like a timeline here. So the day starts out pretty much exactly the way people were expecting. Bryce Young is number one, CJ Stroud is number two, quarterback. Everything's going according to plan. Houston was bluffing. Of course, Houston was not going to actually not pick up a quarterback in this draft. They were messing around. And then we got our curveball. It really did look like for a second there that a team like the Titans was going to trade up to 3, get their quarterback, and it would really go the dream. Quarterback, and then we would have our pick of all the non-quarterbacks at 5. But then Houston decided we're not messing around. Houston decided we are trying to get 2 blue chippers out of this draft, and we're going to make everybody happy. We're going to make our head coach, who wanted Will Anderson, happy, and we're going to make our fans happy by getting our quarterback of the future. We're going to make everybody happy. They traded back up, giving up a future first and the upcoming 33rd overall pick tomorrow to get Will Anderson. And immediately the wrinkle had made itself present. Somebody actually traded up for a non-quarterback in the top 5 of a draft, which I don't think happens very often. In fact, I almost wonder if it ever happens these days. When people trade up, they almost always trade up for a quarterback, right?
I can't think in recent history. You've had, of course, the old Julio Jones trade from Atlanta back in the day, but those are really few and far between that they ever really occur. You're right. It's too much of a cost. And that was didn't the Cardinals end up back at 12? So how'd that work with the Cardinals where they got 12, 33, and a future first on that trade?
And they traded back up to 6. And then they got a guy who they probably should have taken at 12 anyway. So it all kind of like worked out in the end.
Yeah.
So anyway, Will Anderson goes off the board, and I think that might have been big blow number 1. I do think Will Anderson was probably high on our board and was somebody we may very well have taken if he
Agreed.
was there.
Yeah.
And then big blow number 2 comes 1 pick later. Anthony Richardson goes to the Colts. Not shocking or anything, but I think that there was a sense that it could have been Levis or Richardson. They went Richardson, and there was a lot of reason to believe the Seahawks really liked Anthony Richardson. So I feel like that was kind of big blow number 2.
Yeah. Agreed. I
Mm-hmm.
think the Anderson one especially would have made things very easy at 5.
Right. So at that point, the Seahawks, they get up on the clock and they end up taking a cornerback, the highest they have ever taken a cornerback by far in the Pete Carroll era. I think it might be the highest we've ever taken a cornerback, beating out Sean Springs, who I think was 6th, if I recall correctly.
That sounds That sounds maybe about right. I can't quite remember on that one. He was a high pick, but I can't remember if he was top 5 or just out of it.
I think he was 6th. So we end up with Devon Witherspoon, cornerback out of Illinois, somebody that you and me both talked about during our scouting process this year.
Mhm.
Somebody who really was starting to cruise up the boards just a little bit there at the end, it felt like. And I guess we got to do it again. I mean, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about this guy coming forward because I think we're going to have to introduce some Seahawks fans to this guy because he was not on the radar of a lot of Seahawks fans. We're going to have to help them figure this one out. But tell me about Devon Witherspoon from your perspective.
He is a real feisty corner, slightly undersized for what you normally would want, for especially Keith Carroll corners. I think that tells you about how they like him as a player. The fact that they're willing to take a guy who's an arm inch length lacking, and then maybe about 2 inches lacking in height of what they would like to have for the position. He is absolutely a dog for the position. We throw that term around a lot, but I think that this is one that certainly would, if we're only going to apply it to a select few players, if we say that in this draft, there are 10 players defensively that you would put a dog label on the top of that just rugged, like this guy's pure football player. He's going to get in there and do what he needs to do. He's not going to shy away from contact. He's going to get it. That's this kid. And he's a complete football player and that he can tackle and cover. So you're not just getting a pure cover guy or just a guy that just can play the run real well and then kind of struggles in coverage. He's also not a guy that to me is either a pure zone guy or a pure man guy. The tape that I watched, he was doing both of those elements. He can walk up and press and run with you step for step, draping you, or he can play off coverage and drop back into a bit of zone. So he provides you a lot of versatility in what he brings to the table, Brendan. I thought that the key with him, and the only reason why I had him as the number 2 cornerback on my and eventual horizontal board behind Gonzalez, was because I didn't know if we would really go to the man-based concepts you'd need to take advantage of him. Because though he can play zone, I think you need to play a high prevalence of man in order to get the best out of it. This guy's best in the hip pocket of guys running step for step with him. That's when he's at his best. He gave up 0 touchdowns last year in college football, highly graded player by PFF. He is legitimately really good. He is legitimately instantaneously, the second he walks on the field, going to be your cornerback number 2 over Mike Jackson, Trey Brown, and Kobe Bryant. That's going to be immediate. It's not going to take time. It's not going to be like, well, he's working out the rough kinks. Immediately, he's going to give you that.
Yeah, I think that's all pretty fair. I think that one thing, listening to what Pete and John have to say about this pick, they keep stressing how fierce he is, how physical he is. They compared him to Troy Polamalu. In fact, I think that's one thing that Carroll came back to a couple times with the way that he hits, with the way that he comes up and runs support. It's special. He's special in that regard. And I agree with you about the man coverage. That is why. So, little bit of a background here. I had Devon Witherspoon like 17th on my big board because I wasn't looking at the Seahawks as a man coverage scheme. If we switch to a man cover scheme this year, and by the way, it makes sense, right? Woolen can do it. Like Woolen's one of the fastest players in the NFL. He can 100% keep up with players in man coverage all day.
100%.
His pick 6 against the Lions this year, that was in man coverage, right? He's chasing a dude down across the field, right?
The Seahawks coaches directly referenced at the end of the year, Brendan, that what he did best last year when Tariq Woolen was at his best, it was not fitting to the old designs of the zone-based defense. It was when he was running man. I think it was man match principles mainly, which is now we get into like semantics. But essentially, he was doing man-based stuff more than the zone-based stuff in what was bringing about those results. Now, coach, that's from the coach's mouth.
Right. So if that is the case, I think you are getting a player that is probably worthy of being picked at number 5. But I was going into this draft assuming we were going to do the same things that we always do. It's Pete Carroll's defense. He wants to run zone, so therefore we're going to run zone. But this pick has me thinking maybe not. Now, I did have a few people in the chat who actually said that, hey, I think that actually Witherspoon will be better in zone than man because he's not super fast. I think his 40 time was like 4.42, and that was with him weighing 181 pounds. So he might add a little bit of weight, and he might end up a little bit slower than that. So some people actually think he'll be better in zone than man. So we could be reading the situation wrong, but I don't think so. I think he's much better as a man corner.
Yeah, I mean, that's my only issue with that as a coming to a conclusion point on this guy as a player is that you're making that assessment then based on a 40 time. What does the tape tell you? Does the tape tell you he's better in zone or that he's better in man? I don't know if you watched. I don't know how people could watch Witherspoon's tape. I mean, he's done both, so he does them both, and he does them both really well at a high level. I bet with PFF's grades, he's probably graded out well in both of the two elements of things. But when you watch the tape with the guy, it's undeniable that he's at his best when he's man based. I don't know about 40 times and shortness and all that. I just know that the tape says this guy runs step for step with the guy as a man based corner, and that's where you want him at his best. That's where he's at his best. You can slide him into doing zone. It's not that he can't do it, but to get the most out of him, to get him at his most impactful, you got to have him manned up.
My fear with this pick, my concern with this pick is mostly based around his size. He's a little bit small, a little bit lean, and his arms are a little bit short. And I've read some things. Some people think that he will end up playing slot corner in the NFL because he won't be able to press effectively. How concerned are you about that personally?
We stopped pressing the second the NFL started cracking down on the piddly-anny BS ticky-tack holding calls that they put through our Legion of Boom. That was the way the NFL wanted to kill the LOB was, here's how we'll do it. We'll just bring a bunch of these ticky-tack calls and we'll eventually force them not to run press anymore so they can stop killing these receivers off the line. Then we'll give these receivers back their free releases, and now that'll reduce the effectiveness of the Seahawks defense. And it worked. Jeez. I am not a jungle gym. Okay, please. So that's we don't press as it is, but we don't press because of that. That we stopped pressing, I think, as much because we were like, well, what's the point? We're going to press. You're just going to call the flag. I mean, we might as well just play the off coverage at that point and roll that way. You got to be allowed to roll it. So I don't think that even Tariq last year. Do you remember Tariq doing a lot of press?
True. All right. I mean, it's not just about the press part. It's also about him just generally being a little bit on the smaller side. But you're not overly concerned about him ending up in the slot, right? Because that would be, I think, at the point where you say you spend a top 5 pick on a slot corner, like that's questionable. I agree with that.
Yeah, that would be if he ends up as the slot full time. It would impact this pick in a way that would be very negative in your outlook of it, taking that at number 5 overall, especially in a draft that had a lot of other slot corners. You go back, get Clark Phillips in the 3rd round if you're that dead set on getting a slot corner at that point. I do believe that this kid's going to be able to play on the outside, and I think that when it comes down to it, you got to sometimes walk away a little bit from the measurables and the stuff when the tape is so undeniable. That's the thing about those measurables. This was my point about Jalen Carter. Will Anderson, who ran a 4.6 40, yet had a team, as you said, be one of the few teams willing to trade up and go get him. There's players that are in every draft, and I've hammered this hard, and I've been pretty consistent about it. It's not that it's a list of 30 and 45 and 50 guys. It's probably about a list of 10, 15 players in a given draft whose tape should tell you the ultimate tale because the tape is so overwhelmingly good. And when you watch Devin Witherspoon's tape, his tape is awesome. His tape is outstanding. His tape pops, sparkles, glitters, shines, whatever you want it to do. It does that. Now, how much do you start to lean into the measurable parts and leave away from that tape? This is what I said about Jalen Carter and Anderson. The same thing I'll say about him here. You want to get staying on the tape on certain guys and let that be what's at the forefront of your mind. And I feel like the more we get a little bit too caught up on his arm size here, the more we get a little bit too caught up on the thing, then that's where we're forgetting about that the tape is pretty outstanding. It ain't just like pretty good. It ain't like Emmanuel Forbes tape or Deontay Banks. Oh, there's some good. Boy, there's some man. Some of the other corners, Sealy Ringo, who had his troubles in off coverage this year in zone. It's not like that. The tape's there and it's on display, and it's there's a reason. I've got a buddy, Brendan, like I've talked to you. I've got a buddy, mine, DMAC, he's won a national title in college and all that. He was a safety. He knows cornerbacks really well. And he reached out to me before all this process on Devin Witherspoon, not for today, before anybody's even talking to him. He's not scouting guys in this draft. He's the Hawk fan, but he's kind of casual with it. But he's like, man, I just saw this guy's tape and I've got to tell you, like, oh my God. And this is not a guy whose opinion on this kind of stuff I value lightly or take softly. He's a guy that has been proven to be very right on this kind of stuff over the years.
And also, if you like stats, just pointing this out here, according to PFF last year, when left in man coverage, Devon Witherspoon's pass rating allowed was 22. So quarterbacks would have been better off spiking the ball in every play than throwing at him on an average basis. So This is definitely a phenomenal man corner. There's no doubt about it. I might even go so far as to call him historically good as a man corner. Now, will those things translate to the NFL? Time will tell. So, some of the guys that the Seahawks could have taken at 5, but chose not to, which was obviously part of the consternation. Because in order to actually be disappointed in a pick, there have to be guys still there that you wanted more. Include Tyree Wilson, Bijan Robinson, Peter Skoronski, Lucas Van Ness, Christian Gonzalez, and of course, Jalen Carter. So, how do you feel, just briefly, about Devon Witherspoon versus that collection of players?
I feel okay with it because I can understand, though I don't come to the ultimate conclusion that's the same in alignment to Schneider and Carroll in the situation of that's the pick I would have taken. It's one that I can say, and not just giving lip service here, Brendan, but I truly believe this, where I understand the logic and reason that went into the pick. And that even though I don't run the same way to the conclusion, I think what they're doing in the fundamentals of their approach to the process is smart, which is that I think that on both of these two picks we talk about, BPA is what's going to drive it along the day. Let's go through this really quick. Carter, character concerns. Tyree Wilson, not sure if he's going to round out into that top end. He's got a long way to go to get there. Will Levis obviously dropped through the bucket at the bottom of the draft. That really wasn't even a possibility at that point. Skoronski, what is his position? Where is he exactly going to play? Not tackle, but where? Brian Branch fell out of the back of the draft. Did you want to go for a Cansey there with the shorter arms? Less certainty maybe about the player he ends up becoming versus the certainty that you could have with cornerback. You and I talked about this when we did the breakdown on the cornerbacks. The thing you had with Gonzalez and Witherspoon, if you went to make them the pick at 5, when you and I discussed that possibility, because we did bring this and broach this as a possibility. And one thing we said that you're coming from on that is you are driving on your board in a true value standpoint. Because I can go through and kind of nick all of those players and find little things that are detriments to them that don't make them necessarily the high value guy on the board. Again, I'm not saying this from the standpoint, this is what I truly believe blue on how I think, but how I see them thinking and looking at it. And I can think that there's an intelligence behind that. You can see how they came to that conclusion on things, especially if they're going to be willing to go to man-based coverages, Brendan, if they're looking to make that transition.
Right. So as time went on, I think I got on board with this pick a little bit more as well, especially when, this is something that I encourage all Seahawks fans to do. I can't tell anybody how to feel, but I do think you need to find a way to make your peace about the Jalen Carter thing, because I watched a little bit of John Schneider's post-draft press conference with Carroll, and based off his reaction and his body language, it was clear he really did not like Carter at all, I think. And I think it was clear that we may have been one of the teams that took Carter off our board completely. We may have been one of those teams. So there was just something didn't work there. And it's pretty obvious what it probably was. It was probably the off the field stuff. And I've said this the whole time, and I'll go with it. If this team decides they don't want Jalen Carter because of the red flags about off the field stuff, I got no problem with that, because this is something that information they have that we just don't.
I don't have a lot more to add than what you just said on it, because I'm in complete alignment where you're at with it. I think we've also been pretty consistent in saying this, not just today, but throughout this process in the consideration of Jalen Carter. Luckily, this gets to be kind of the last time we have to talk about him as the character and all that other stuff, but let's put it out there this last time. Everybody thinks they know the truth on Carter, both in the good and the bad. And the bottom line point on it, in my opinion, is like all of us know a crack, a little slice, a little peephole view of the situation versus the view general managers throughout the league are getting. And I trusted that if John Schneider passed on this guy for the level of undeniable talent that he brings to play on a football field, for him to pass on that guy, it must mean that there is a binder thick, a stack thick of sources and private investigators and all the like that have said this guy is a problem child, that this issue with the racing, that this issue with the conditioning, that the sources you're hearing about him not being coachable is just merely the tip of the iceberg. And that I would support the team if they went that direction and avoiding him because of that. And I that's where I landed it too, Brendan. I understand the folks frustrated not getting him, but I do think our general manager didn't make this choice because of what they saw on the field. And this wasn't made because he's like, that's not good enough for us. I don't want that on my defensive line. It's because of the background.
Yeah. And it's also important to understand here that the reason why the Eagles picked him is because Howie Roseman can afford to get this wrong. He can keep his job. He might be the best GM in the league. And the Eagles can afford to miss on him because they have such a good defense anyway. And they also have veteran presences in that locker room that can help keep him straight and help maybe allow him to be the best version of himself. A lot of teams don't have that.
Hell, they've drafted freaking half of his Georgia team there, right? Between
Yeah.
the last couple of years, they're going to have everybody who knows him, and hopefully there to keep him on that straight and narrow, like you said. So
Yeah.
if you're right, the Eagles had house money here. They had another first round pick later in this draft. They could burn this pick like burning $100 bill and not care one bit about it. As far as how it impacts them, their defensive line is set as it is. They're not relying on him come in and give them instant production. So they got to play from that scenario. And Howie Roseman continues to show why I think he's one of the best general managers in the league. You walk away in this draft, and I think that they had the best first round in the draft, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I mean, we're not the only team that passed up on Carter. I want to stress this too. The Cardinals decided they'd rather pick a low end top left tackle. Like Paris Johnson Jr. is probably one of the least appealing top left tackles in any draft in recent memory.
Mhm.
Most years have one super blue chipper. Paris Johnson was not that, I don't think. The Raiders passed him up for Tyree Wilson, who doesn't even have a position. The Falcons decided they'd rather have a running back. And we're going to have to talk about this a little bit later as well. The Bears decided they'd rather trade down for a candy bar than pick Jalen Carter. The Bears basically gave away their number 9 pick because they didn't thought so little of Carter. So there's something going on there, and we're just going to have to accept that, I think.
Has to be. It's not just us. Like you said, there's other teams that were in that role of it, and nobody was in the position of Howie Roseman. Bears are in there with new general managers. They've got some goodwill built up, but they don't want to burn that out the gate by taking Jalen there. It was going to be a risk. And if the Eagles didn't take Jalen Carter there, there's very likely that he might have slid all the way to us at 20 at that point if he wasn't taken. I don't know. There was the general manager out there that with the stones that was going to make that pick at that point. There was something to this with the background of Jalen Carter. It was going to be not just a small risk, but a major risk in going out there and drafting him.
Okay, so I think that's all we can really say about the pick at 5. My initial reaction was to give it a B-. I think I'd have to recast it a little bit after having more time to look at this, but I don't know exactly how I'm going to cast it. So I'm going to hold off on any firm evaluation yet, but it seems like a good pick, but I don't love it.
Do we factor in at all about the fact that this does sort of mean that kind of does mean Kobe Bryant, Trey Brown, 4th round picks? I know those aren't high picks, but now those are kind of selections in retrospect that are, I guess these guys aren't going to develop. I guess you don't see them as starters. Guess that's just depth guys.
We'll see where they end up. Some of them might end up as safety. Like, I think we're going to have a big safety exodus after this season. All of them could be gone. A lot of those guys could end up playing at safety. We both talked about how Kobe Bryant's natural position may end up being safety. So if that ends up being the case, then not necessarily. And overall, I think the thing to understand about this draft, and this is something that I'm going to talk about after we talk about our other pick, is the approach that this team was taking with this draft. It was not filtering everything through various lenses. It was just trying to take straight up BPA, forget the needs, forget the roster, just go BPA. I think that was the approach. So you're going to have things like that when you take that approach, and that's okay.
I agree with you. I don't hate the pick on that point with it on that. So it's not negation for like the reasons you gave, because it is BPA being driven at the end of the day. And that's what I want in my drafts above all else in many respects.
We got some super chats here. Empower, thank you for the $10. From this first round, I've learned that perhaps finding a middle ground between BPA and need is the optimal path forward. Adopting one extreme over the other is too big a trade-off. Not worth it, in my opinion. I can agree with that. I think that there is some middle ground between BPA and position of need. I do agree with that. But what I am wondering is if maybe we really didn't like the other options available to us. Like, I think it's very clear now we did not like Carter at all. Maybe we felt similarly about guys like Tyree Wilson and Bijan and Skoronski. Maybe we felt similar ways.
I agree. I think too that you're right. It would be nice, I think, Empower to find that sort of honey spot of where you're getting that balance in play. I think the difficulty becomes it's very easy to then drive yourself into the path of moving between balancing the both. You sort of just end up into more of the reach edge of things. Like, it's almost to operate from a BP standpoint, you have to almost be devout in your willingness to really toe that line. Otherwise, you really find yourself falling back into the other. That seems to be my general feel on this, is it just doesn't seem to be that you can find that optimum path absent a couple of organizations that are out there in the NFL. But that would be that would be optimum. You're right.
Right. And look, if we liked Jalen Carter, then it would have been the perfect mix of BPA and position of need. But if we didn't, and we didn't like some of these other guys, then at a certain point, you don't want to LJ Collier yourself. And I think this pick is kind of the exact opposite of LJ Colliering yourself. So how can I be that upset at it?
It's 100% the opposite. And John talked about this a couple of days ago on the Bob and Weidman show, where he said, we've been in the past in this spot where this very scenario sits in my mind here, where he says you have this positional group in a draft that's really deep in one scenario of things. And what we do is we go, well, we got this player B over here versus the A that's in this class we like, and player B is more for what we need. And that's a thinner part of this class. We're not going to be able to be going back a la LJ Collier. We're not going to be able to go back and readdress this later in the draft. So even though this is the guy that we have higher on our board as far as value at the moment, we're going to go back over here to LJ pick to that other guy because that's more of the need. And we can come back, the value of this draft, for the corners of this draft, we can always come back to these guys. And so they didn't do that this year. You're right. That's the evidence to me in my mind of it, that it is a value pick, that it is a BPA type of pick in both of these two selections.
Mm-hmm. John Stillwell, thank you for the $20. I think Woolen being more of a man cover guy is one of the reasons they took this guy. And he is having fun out there. Yeah, I mean, look, I don't have a preference for zone over man. I just want whatever works the best with the personnel that you have. So it's not like I'm sitting here mad that we're going to go to man defense and I don't like that. No, I don't really care. I just want to do something that works.
Agreed. I'm the same way on that, John. If it works, then let's use it. I do like it. I think John also indicates a really nice point here, Brendan, which is that we had this with Sherman. I was making this point earlier with Sherman, years after he got his contract and after he had gotten a couple of years of 7-8 picks, right, a year, then he suddenly has this point where teams stopped throwing his way. And that was right about the time that Brandon Browner and Byron Max were moving out the door. And so then you had guys always on the other side of him that you would kind of go out and attack a little bit, and they weren't strength players over on that other side of the other cornerback position, partly because you were paying everybody else. You couldn't afford to do it. But now you potentially bring out there a guy in Tariq Woolen who can be a superstar level cornerback, maybe one of the true next great corners in this game, in this sport. And now you have a guy on the other side who's a sub lockdown like guy on that other side as well. Quarterbacks don't have any place to run to, no refuge, no home to go to. They have to force the ball to one or the other. And now you've got them in a bit of a pickle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think this can work. I think that in some ways, Woolen may have been hampered a little bit by the zone defense. I think in some ways he'll be even better if he's allowed to play man.
Agreed. I would like them leaning into that. And on top of it, Brendan, what else does it do? Allows you to stack that line of scrimmage. So if you do have some deficiency as far as your defensive line talent and stopping the run or creating pressure, now you can create some forceful pressure packages. And you having guys like Bobby Wagner and Jamal Adams, guys that are plus defenders in their ability to attack in that fashion.
Garth Knight, thank you for the $4.99. Would I be mistaken in saying if we pulled YouTube clips from 3 years back, we'd see Hawk content creators justifying the selection? I'm assuming that's the selection of LJ Collier. I'm going to guess here.
Yes, I guess that would be the case. It certainly would not be the case for me.
Yeah, we know that. I've seen your LJ Collier clip. I've seen your Jordan Brooks clip. I've seen your Dwayne Eskridge clip.
Yeah, I was a little out on those guys initially, Brendan. I wasn't sold on them initially, just to be clear. How were you on LJ initially?
I thought he was a reach, but I thought he would be a decent player. I was like, there's a high floor, low ceiling here, but didn't even have the high floor, I guess.
Yeah. I thought he was at least going to be a run stuffer, even as I was low. I thought, well, I'll give you something in the run stuffing game, maybe, but
not even.
Not even.
Not good. Not good. But yeah, I mean, I do think that when a team selects a player, they the fans do find a way to figure out what's the happy path here. How does this end up working in a positive way for us? And in almost all cases, you can always find the happy path. It doesn't always manifest, but you can always find it.
Yeah. And I and I know I don't think we're very guilty. I don't think we're guilty of this at all, of just appealing to authority on this a little bit. But most of the time to me too is, as long as it's not an insane reach where you're really driving at it and you're really going out, you can understand the pick. And then these picks, I would apply that to both of these two selections, Brendan, where these are not those outside the box picks to me, like LJ was, or like Jordan was, or like Eskridge was, where it's just, this is kind of a crazy pick in these spots. It just felt to me like, what's going on here? LJ was the 17th defensive lineman taken in the first round. Say nothing of what you thought is topside. You thought you were going to land a great defensive lineman and one that's seen 16 taken in the first round. My goodness. So I think it's a good natural nature from us, Brendan, to try a little bit more into finding, even if we disagree on the surface of it as content creators, going, okay, how does this come together though in my mind in maybe a way I'm not seeing it? Because we're not going to be masters of the universe on this stuff and see everything beautifully and wonderfully. And, I would love at the end of the day to be wrong on some of the stuff at times when I've been, I would have been happy to have LJ go out there and be a Pro Bowler. That would have been great to have me be looking stupid on that one. But, I definitely am nowhere near on these picks. I'm not in the vicinity of where I was on those other three guys with these two selections.
Right. All right, so now let's fast forward to our pick at number 20 here. I think the Seahawks probably caught another blow right before their pick this time, because it looked like Khalid Kancey was going to be the guy. I think he was on our board. I think he was the choice. I think he was going to make a lot of people feel a lot better, and then Tampa Bay snuck in there because they lost that playoff game last year. If they had beaten the Cowboys last year, they would have picked in front of us. So it all came down to that game, which I streamed because I was like, this matters, guys. This may matter. And people were like, no, it doesn't matter. I'd rather see the Cowboys play the Niners. And it mattered. It mattered a lot.
Boy, did it ever. That one did hurt. That one stung, Brendan. As I was sitting there with Kancey can make this all right. This way you got Kancey and Witherspoon. That's a great start. We can go with that. But they swooped us. Man. No two ways about it. And he's going to be a hell of a player for them, I think. With Vita Vea next to Vita. Look out.
Yeah. Yeah. Some people think that Kancey was not going to fit in a 3-4 because his arms are so short, but I don't agree. I think he'll be good.
I get where they're coming from on that. I do, because historically speaking, 3-4s, that's been the problem. Some of it though, to me, I've come back on this, Brendan's thinking more of 3-4 was always historically speaking, more of the 2 gapping stuff. And this 3-4 version, the Fangio 3-4 version, is more of the 1 gapping, gap and a half type stuff, which now gets him more into attack mode rather than having to hold the point of attack where the arm length gets put on bad display.
So our pick was up at 20, and there were still some very interesting options here. Will Levis was still on the board at this point, and the opportunity to get a future franchise quarterback at 20 was definitely appealing to some. You had Brian Bresee, who is going to be a nice kind of consolation prize for some people for Jalen Carter. There was a guy like a Miles Murphy who had fallen, I think, a little too far at that point. Nolan Smith, some people like Nolan Smith. There was definitely some appealing stuff going on there. Even, I think at that point, Brian Branch was off the table because we had already taken a cornerback, but I would have been okay with Brian Branch. He's just so good. I would have been okay with it.
Yeah.
But we didn't do any of that. We decided to go with a guy who I did not really see coming as a Seahawks selection, Jackson Smith Njigba, the hyphen from Ohio State, Buckeye.
Njigba.
So slot receiver, had an incredible year in 2021, but good luck finding him doing anything else any other year, because it was just that 1 year for him. But it was such a good year that he was generally considered to be the best receiver in this draft and probably a top 15 pick. So we get him at 20, and we've talked a good amount about Jackson Smith in recent months, but let's briefly go over what makes this guy valuable.
Well, Jackson Smith and Njigba is a guy that is definitely specialized, I would believe, in being a slot-only guy at the next level. That he did have some snaps, I guess, at Ohio State to a degree, playing on the outside, but he was really an inside-only guy, and that's where he's going to go. He does go 6'1", but he's got 30.5-inch arms, and he did run like a 4.55 on that super fast track out there in Ohio State on his pro day. So he's not got the speed. He does not have the arm length if you're talking about being able to win on the outside. He's not going to have the speed to separate. He's not going to have the arm length to win in contested catch situations on the outside. on top of being kind of a lively guy that does just sort of naturally better fit into the slot. It doesn't mean it's a death knell. The modern NFL game in many ways is moving to having the slots out there 60, 65, 75%, 70% of the time, sometimes with certain offenses, the Rams being one of them. And then we running the playbook that the Rams came from. They certainly had many years, Brendan, including the year they went to the Super Bowl, where they leaned on three wide receiver sets more than anybody else in football. So Seahawks going back to this makes sense within the context of this offense and his skill set. He is a really good slot receiver. He should be one of the best slot receivers immediately when he comes in, as long as that hamstring holds up that held him back last year. He's got, to me, as far as a player comp, the look of him is an Amon St. Brown. So I think people will have some issues going, well, you took Amon St. Brown, a guy went 4th, 5th round. You're taking this guy here at number 20 overall for that skill set. But you're also getting Amon St. Brown, which is going to be a chain mover. And the thing that I tried to push back, and I'm not even, it was hard about this, Brendan, is I wasn't really over the moon on this pick, but I was just finding myself trying to kind of explain it to people a little bit on what I thought there, again, like the other pick with Witherspoon, there was some intelligence behind it. And even if I'm not fully over the moon on it, you run the West Coast offense. The West Coast offense is about really moving the chains. And to move the chains, you need guys on 3rd down that can be there to move those chains. That's what Amon St. Brown does. That's why the Detroit Lions last year led the NFL in 3rd down conversions. You could go to that guy time and time again and get your conversion when you need to. And it's hard to do that relying on Lockett and DK on the outside, especially when those guys can be doubled at the high prevalence that they can be double teamed. So you get the chain mover. We had this, Brendan, back in the day with Holmgren, with a Bobby Ingram type. Bobby Ingram was as valuable a player as you had on those Mike Holmgren West Coast offensive teams, and his ability to keep those chains moving. And now you've got your guy like that for this offense. So that's on the good side of it. Obviously, for me, getting a little bit of a guy that's limited is tough. The other part that's hard for me on this one, Brendan, is the fact this does mean and signal now you're going to run a lot less of the 2 and 3 tight end sets. And I felt like you had a lot of success, that the success you had running those sets was part of what made you a top 10 offense last year, both in the pass and the run game.
Yeah. To me, this pick is very similar to the Witherspoon pick. It doesn't make sense to me if we do things the way we did things last year. Running zone defense and running 3 receiver sets less than just about anybody. I think last year we were right near the bottom of the list in terms of how often we ran 3 receiver sets. But if you change things up to where you start putting your slot receiver out there 75, 80, 85% of the time, that's different. That does change things. JSN is the best slot receiver in this draft. I don't question that. He's not fast, but his 3-cone and 20-yard shuttle illustrate how quick he is, how elusive he is, and how easily he gets open. That stuff's going to be great.
Those are elite numbers, right? Let's let the audience
know. Those are some of the best numbers any receiver has ever posted at the combine. It was like a 6.57 20-yard shuttle and a 6.93 3-cone or something like that.
Yeah.
They were historically good.
Yeah.
So I can easily see how this works, but there are a couple things. I ended up thinking the pick was fine as long as we're going to do that thing about playing a lot of 3 wide receivers, because I don't want to see this guy playing on the outside. I don't want to see us trying to force that. We don't need that. Don't need any of that. But I wonder if you could have gotten somebody 92% as good in a later round, like, for instance, Marvin Mims, even a guy like Tank Dell, or I know you don't like this guy very much, but I like Rashee Rice. These are guys you could have gotten tomorrow in the 2nd or 3rd round, sometimes even maybe even in the 4th round. And I'm wondering, could you have gotten 92% of JSN with those guys? I feel like you could have.
Well, I think we are of a like mind on this because we are not as high on JSN, I think, as the front office is. But I think your point is 100% on the case, and it's almost 200% on the case. I mean, just go down the list here, Brendan. Keyshawn Boot, Josh Downs, Marvin Mims. You mentioned Rashee Rice, Nathaniel Dell, Xavier Hutchinson, Cedric Tillman could probably give you some of that. Parker Washington, Charlie Jones, who the Seahawks have met with in the 4th round, I think could very well give you somewhat close to that level of production at that point in time. So yeah, I think to answer your point, I think, I do believe you could have gotten that in other places of this draft. There's a lot of receivers in this draft that are just slot only guys. Jackson's not the only one. Then there would have been very good quality guys. That would have been improvements, Brendan, over what you had out of Eskridge last year or what you're looking to have out of this next upcoming year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't believe you could have gotten 92% of Witherspoon in the 3rd round. I don't. Like, I think there are good cornerbacks in the 3rd and 4th and even 5th round this year, but there is nobody who I think would have been almost all of Witherspoon. Witherspoon the way he plays is very different and much better than any of those players. But JSN, I look at it and I wonder, yeah, he's going to be good, but you could have gotten Brian Bresee with this pick and then gotten Marvin Mims in the third, and I think we'd be feeling a little bit better versus now what? Instead of getting Marvin Mims and Brian Bresee, you're going to get JSN and I don't know, Kobe Turner, or maybe somebody like what's the Carl Brooks? Like, yeah, I know which one I'd rather have.
Mm-hmm. Agreed, or a combination of what you'd rather have. And yeah, I land where you land on it. And that's, just where our assessment is with Jackson. He's a good player. He's got a lot he brings to the table, but that is, I think, still a completely valid outlook on it going, the other combinations, this or that, A or B, door B, A, door B, and door B for us, I think time and time again on that, we could do a variety of different combinations. We would be coming out saying, I'd like to go with door B over that. I think the thing that it is nice that it does illustrate, like the first pick is, Brendan, is we can absolutely say with 100% certainty that it was a pick drawn to value, right? This was not a reach pick. This wasn't to fill a need. It was simply because they looked at this as being the best player they had on their board.
Yes. And I do want to illustrate that point, but by going to the NFL mock draft database and looking at their big board as of just before the draft started, they had Jackson Smith Njigba at 11. So he was in their top 12. And you go around to big boards right before the draft, they all had him in the top 15 pretty much. They all did. So there was a sense from my chat right after the pick that we reached. We did not reach. We definitely did not. You can say it's a bad pick. You can say you don't like it. We definitely did not reach. If anything, we got great value. That doesn't mean it's going to be the good pick, but we got good value.
So your point, I think there's a very good chance that both in the case of Witherspoon to the Lions at 6, and then to our pick to the Chargers after us, the team behind us very well would have just taken those two guys if we didn't. That's, I feel like I know Detroit traded out of it, but Detroit might have traded out partly because of Witherspoon being now off the board. And you look at Chargers taking a receiver after we took Jackson Smith and Njigba. Certainly that looked to be a big need for them.
Yeah, and in fact, I think we threw the Lions for such a loop when we took Witherspoon in front of them that their brains broke and they proceeded to have the worst first round in NFL history. Like, that's how shocked they were. That's how taken aback they were that they lost out on Witherspoon.
It seemed like they were circling around him for quite a bit of time. That's for sure. How about Dan Campbell taking a Campbell?
Yeah.
That is a very Dan Campbell kneecap chewing pick right there.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of feel for them. That Lions team felt like they were heading the right way, and then they have this draft, and I'm like, they need to clean out that front office yesterday.
The Lions do?
They took Jahmyr Gibbs in the top 15. They took
I disagree with that. I guess I'm in a little disagreement with you on it because I think both of those two guys were first round guys. Gibbs is a little bit high to take, but he was going in the first round by many guys mocks. Like some the Cowboys probably were going to take him at 26. Like he was going in the first round as the second back.
Maybe I wasn't into it. I'm not feeling it.
I think they had a dangerous offense last year that doesn't take any real step backs. Then they add this kid to help them out with their first running back who's constantly injured, but really deadly when he's in there. Campbell comes in and definitely improves their middle linebacker position. He's an upgrade over that Oklahoma State guy by a wide margin. So I think they made their team better. Maybe they didn't have, I don't think they had like the best draft or anything. I wouldn't say they killed it, but I don't think that they got the value out of there either. I did pretty good, Brendan. I did 28 of 31 guys selected as first round grades in my mock. I got 28 of 31 as far as the total, which guys win in that mock in that first one. But both those guys I had as first round guys.
I didn't do that great. I'm looking at it right now. I had Levis, Brian Branch, Joey Porter Jr., Trenton Simpson, Darnell, Keeley, Mayer, and Sanders. Although, to be clear, that's my big board. That's not necessarily who I thought was going to go where. So a little different. That's
way different because if you'd done the mock, you might have done more of the poll at that point with certain teams and going that other way.
I would have definitely missed on Levis though.
I missed. That was one of my misses. So I had the what I have of Levis, Osiris Torrance, I think, and then one other guy was that I had missed on.
And the other point I want to make there, Devon Witherspoon is currently 5 on the mock draft database big board. 5th.
Mhm.
And the only guy we could have gotten who was ahead of him at that pick was Carter, who clearly we were completely out on. So
Right. Exactly. We come back to that value thing. If BBA is driving it, that's a good, just my opinion. I don't want to be a hypocrite here, Brendan. You know, I'm calling for it time and time again, saying I want my organization to operate from a BPA status. Time and again, I want that. I don't want that at every turn you to operate. So if they start to do it, I can't get mad at it just because I don't get the results I want.
yeah. And real quick, the other thing I wanted to say about JSN that has me concerned is I do think the concerns of him being injury prone are at least somewhat legitimate.
Mhm.
I mean, it's not. There are guys in college football who have had like two or three major injuries, like Mohammed Ibrahim at Minnesota. Like
Mhm.
that's different than this guy. This guy's had basically the hamstring injury that he just never could beat this year.
Yeah.
But I do think there's a little bit of a concern of him not being able to hold up in the NFL. I'm at
He's not
least a
the
little
most,
bit concerned.
he's not the most rocked up guy. Your point on that.
Mhm.
Like he's not really super solidly built receiver. He's kind of got a little bit of a live build to him a little bit.
But I think the pick's okay. I'm not pumped about it, but I do believe we got the best slot receiver in this draft. I can at least say that.
Agreed. And I feel about the same way with it, where it's, you know, like I say, you go, it's fine. You know, it's not the greatest for content reaction, Brendan, because we're supposed to get over the moon with this or get, you know, happy or angry about this to certain degrees. But you just kind of find yourself kind of going, it's fine.
David Pugh, thank you for the $9.99. Don't know if y'all know this, but y'all's chat is full of drafts and scout experts. Got a lot of egos in here. Got to get over it. Some acting like the boyfriend who won't move on after the breakup. I mean, again, I can't tell anybody else how to feel, and I understand a lot of people didn't like this day one, and I wasn't in love with it either, so I do get it. Like, I'm not really here to tell people how to feel. It's just I see certain points get made that are just factually wrong. Like there are a lot of people who said, "Oh, we reached for Devon Witherspoon." No, we definitely didn't. There is no universe where we reached on Witherspoon.
I agreed.
So yeah, so when some people say that, I like to push back a little bit. I like to be like, on the big boards, he was always in the top 8. He's 5th on the aggregate. He's clearly minimum a top 10 guy on pretty much every mock. So we didn't reach. We didn't reach on JSN either, not even close. We actually got a bit of a value steal with JSN.
Yeah, you can do there. It's really two different things, as you say. It's kind of pairing these apart, and one of them is not liking the pick versus not liking the pick, and then trying to make your hate for the pick be more reinforced by overcalling it than what it is. Just be accurate in your dissertation of it, and it's not bad from a value or reach. These guys were going to go in those slots in those picks. Both of these two guys I had in my top 20 on mine. I had Witherspoon going to Washington, who ended up taking Forbes. So they would have definitely taken him at 16 where I had him on my mock. So he's going top 20 minimum at that point. And like you said on Jackson, I had him going to the Titans in my mock. So I had him at 11. So this all lines up to what I thought coming into this as far as where their value goes too. I'm not suddenly like, you're not doing this either. We're not reclaiming history here in our outlook and thoughts on this. We've been consistent on this when we did them on the breakdown of the cornerbacks and how we looked at them. Yeah.
I mean, both guys were lower on my personal big board, but my personal big board was for the Seahawks, and I was living in a universe where zone defense, not a lot of 3 receiver sets. So if those two things are not the case, that would have changed things significantly.
Absolutely. So it's the value's definitely there. Might not like the take, but the value is definitely there for the picks.
Also, David Pugh again, thank you for the $9.99. Got people here calling JSN injury prone / plagued. Okay, bro. So one hamstring injury is worth that tag. We call him DK plagued or prone as well. I mean, he had a neck injury coming out. Is he too? Well, I think he was, and he's beaten it. He's had 4 healthy years, so that doesn't change the fact that he was injury prone when he came out. I think that was fair. That's why he fell.
Yeah, I think when you're talking about just being a hamstring, unless I'm not aware of any other injuries, David, to your point on that of JSN suffering anything else or going through anything else, it's just simply the hamstring. And the thing with the hamstring is that it's tough as an injury because it takes a while to get healed and you just have to rest it and you can't work out. And you then start to try to work out and you re-aggravate it and it causes it to stretch. And you sometimes just need an off season to let the thing just quiet all the way down. Doesn't mean that he's injury prone, and a hamstring is not indicative of something that's going to be a chronic injury that he's going to be dealing with over and over into the future. So I don't take it as that being makes him injury prone.
Yeah. But I wouldn't call him an Iron Man either, exactly. There are definitely receivers out there who have played every game for, 3, 4 college years.
Hmm.
So, there's a middle ground there where you're like a little bit concerned, but he's not like, I think Dwayne Eskridge got hurt 4 times in his college career or something and missed games because of it. Like, we're not there.
We're nowhere near the vicinity of Eskridge coming out, who had to change his number in college to change his injury luck. He referenced it as that. The other thing, let's also acknowledge with the worry about the injury situation on JSN, he's not going to be an outside guy. Hence, you're not running 3 wide receiver sets 80% of the time. You're going to run it probably at the highest amount 60% of the time. So is he going to get injured running 60% of the snaps out on the football field offensively? Well, I think that takes down the chances of his injury that much more further, I would
Mhm.
think.
Very true. Nolan R. Vance, thank you for the $5. Pete was asked about increased 3 receiver sets, and he made sure to say they like their 2 TE sets. Just needed to get better there, wide receiver 3. Now, you could have 3 receivers and 2 tight ends out there at the same time. I'd do it all the time in Madden.
Don't you have to go empty then? Isn't that what you do?
Yeah, you go empty.
Okay. Well,
Yeah, I'll go
I,
empty.
I guess it's possible in that. Yeah. Gotta
Hmm.
trust those protections.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna get Joe Tippmann, and we're gonna have probably a top 10 offensive line, and it's gonna be good. It's gonna be okay.
I got Benton and Schmitz tomorrow, man. I got Benton and Schmitz
That
tomorrow.
would work too. Schmitz would work. Schmitz would work.
I'll take
Uh,
Tippmann. I'll take Tippmann.
mhm.
I'm not out on
Yeah,
Tippmann.
yeah. But I mean, what percentage of 3 receiver sets do you need to run for a JSN pick to be worth it? I think you got to be pushing up close to like 75%.
I would say 60% is my minimum. I'd love if you want to get up that spot, that certainly takes it to a higher place. But if we're talking about the floor minimum of you're feeling okay operating at this and still thinking you're getting enough out of him that's good enough for production. You're running 60% of your snaps out of 3 wide receiver sets. He ends up this year with 55 to 60 catches, and everybody feels perfectly fine about his level of production at that point.
Right. I think the real key is running more plays on offense. Run more plays on offense by get by sustaining more drives and also getting off the field more on defense, which that part might be a little bit hard.
That might probably be hard, but the first part of that sentiment that you said, the moving of the chains, my reference, we come back around to just going full circle back to the Almon St. Brown. What helps you start to move those chains is having this kind of third down receiver in this who can go get those free and easy 7-8 yard stop routes, drop in the zone, hunker down, make the catch drop, just to have an innate feeling, an innate quickness, an innate change of direction skills to be able to make it happen inside in that way.
DJ Owen, thank you for the $2. Thoughts on DK feels about a wide receiver taken day 1? Hmm. What do you think? How do you
But
think DK feels about us taking a receiver on day 1?
I think he's probably pretty happy about it. From the standpoint, it makes their offense tougher to deal with. And one more better player on offense means maybe the one more less likely the potential of the safety drawing to his side of the field at the high rate that they have been drawn to his side of the field. You maybe start to force teams to play things a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? A little more legitimate over the top with him because
Hmm.
you have this guy lurking in the slot that is dangerous. Whereas before you've not been worried in the least bit about whatever slot guy you're bringing down there.
Yeah, I don't think he's upset about it, and I imagine he's quite thrilled about it. I mean, at the end of the day, this we our slot receiver right now is Derek Young, a 7th round pick who has like 3 career catches. This is
Yeah.
certainly better than that.
And he knows at this point Eskridge isn't getting it done. So,
Yeah.
he's like, we got to do something with it.
Yeah. And it's not like JSN's coming for his job. DK is an outside receiver. JSN's a slot receiver.
It's a good point. Another spot with it. So no worry to DK. It ain't going to hurt him anyway.
Jason Tudor, thank you for the 220 Canadian. Scary thought for me. Levis to the Rams at 36. Oh yes, we've a lot of people in the chat. We're talking about this one.
It was on my mind as I was looking at the end on tomorrow's day and who's the teams picking ahead of us and who's likely to go where with it. And it did strike out to me 2 things that scared me about looking at tomorrow was number 1, our defensive tackle position's been pulled down pretty significantly as far as the true top end talent that maybe is left and available. And then number 2, Will Levis very well may likely go to the Rams at 36 and they get their quarterback of the future. It's possible.
Unfortunate. But if they do pass on him, then there's a very intriguing opportunity, and we'll see how married the Seahawks really are to BPA. Like that is the ultimate test of your BPA philosophy.
Boy, is it not ever. And if you don't take him, boy, you must have hated Levis. I mean, both if the Rams and Hawks pass on him, that's a death knell for Levis at that point to me. If Levis is getting kicked by the two teams that are literally running the same playbook that he ran in college, that has all the skill set markers that both teams would gravitate towards looking for from the position, Houston, we got a problem.
Yeah, and the Rams are the perfect team to do it too. They know they're not doing anything this year.
Yeah, they're all in on their rebuild.
Yeah, like there's no pressure. Just go in there. If you end up getting the starting, if Stafford gets hurt again, then you can go in again. But you're not going to start the season as the starter, and we have no expectations. We know we're terrible.
Mm-hmm. Stafford's probably not lasting more than a year.
Yeah. And also, Levis is used to having terrible teammates. So going to the Rams and throwing the ball to fullbacks and UDFAs he's going to feel right at home.
Skoranek, whatever that guy's name is, Skoranek.
Garth Knight, thank you for the $4.99. I reached for the Amazon remote when Witherspoon was drafted, when JSN was picked, after I just threw up my hands and realized we're the Chicago Bears. Well, the Chicago Bears traded down a spot in the top 10 and got a 2024 fourth round pick. I don't think anybody's the Bears. Nobody is the Bears.
Nobody is indeed the Bears. So I did like what they did to get some offensive line help for their young quarterback Fields. Finally, nice to see them start to take some links with that a little bit. Skronsky will find some place on that line. But yeah, Garth, there was plenty of people in my chat that I saw, and I was trying to talk a lot of people off the ledge on this one.
They didn't get Skronsky. They got Darnell Wright.
Oh, yeah, it was Darnell. Sorry. I was thinking of somebody. I don't know who else. He's won a couple picks later. So Darnell, still a good pick, though. Solid for them at the right tackle position.
Yeah, I got no problem with that pick, but you're trading down from 9 to 10 and you get a candy bar for it. Like, what the heck happened there? I mean, some people are going to say, well, the Bears obviously didn't want Carter, but okay, just take like, it was just so bizarre to me. It's like, is trading down dead? Like, because the Texans traded down from 6 to 12. I think it was 6 to 12 and barely got anything too.
Yes. The last couple of years, if you look through the drafts, as far as the trades that have happened in the first round, especially, they've died down because teams don't want to pay the price anymore to go up there and take that cost in that way. And even a team like the Texans this year that did chose to move up, they're doing it, Brendan, also having had multiple first round picks, multiple picks in order to feel accommodated to be able to pull that off. And so I think John's run into this a couple times the last few years where he's just not getting value. Quite frankly, if I'm the Bears in that standpoint, I think it's a good deal for them. You're not taking Carter. You're not having any other trade down scenario. You have your guy U10-10 to pick anyway. You know the Eagles are going to take Carter. They're just giving you a free fourth round pick, and you lessen the salary impact of what Darnell Washington is going to cost you as well, maybe by only $100,000. But I mean, it's not nothing, So from their standpoint, I think it's fairly smart. I'd love to see our team.
You could have done better. You could have done better than a 2024 fourth round pick.
I feel like John was sitting there, for instance, at 20, chomping at the bit to try to move off at 20, but he was unable to do it. What trades did we see after we got out of these picks, Brendan, into the 13 onward? Who else was making any real trades across the board?
Yeah, I mean, the Cardinals got good value for 3, but I guess after the top 3, your trade value just plummets.
Totally
That's the only way I can put it.
Yeah. Absolutely, totally plummets. What did the Arizona give up to come back up?
I think it was like their third round pick. Like nothing. Like they almost got to move back up for free, but then they took a guy who they probably should have taken at 12 anyway. So whatever.
God, now they're sitting on the Texans' first round pick, and the Texans are going to suck next year.
Yeah, I'm not happy about it.
I'm not either. I don't like that.
Barry Soitoro, thank you for the $10. These picks feel like safe picks, to be honest. I think that's pretty fair.
Yeah, I think that's the upshot, though, of going for value. When you go for value, you're going to tend to land in a lot of safety, I think. The question will come back to, but you didn't reach for this thing that we needed more of, or we already feel good enough about our depth in given position A that you just drafted for. That's the usually blowback you get. But the good part of it is the warm and fuzzy part of it is that you feel pretty safe about the picks and the level of production that they're going to give you.
And like, if you're looking at the other picks we could have made, the gamble picks, like Jalen Carter, maybe the ultimate gamble pick. I'd say Tyree Wilson's a gamble pick as well, because there's something special there, but who knows if he's ever going to get there. Like, do I feel like I've been thinking all day, how do I actually feel about Tyree versus Devon Witherspoon? Because initially I was like, I would much rather have Tyree Wilson. But if I'm opening myself up to the Hawks running man coverage in 2023, then I don't think that's true anymore, actually.
Well, and I'll tell you this, they could have come to the assessment that I came with Tyree Wilson, which is that I could never quite get fully sold on him as the pick at 5 because you're going for this high upside guy that's so far away from getting to his upside. When is the return going to come into place? When is he going to realize who he is as a player in the NFL? It is not going to be immediately. He relies distinctly and only on power at the college level, and he's not got any real dip or bend. He's got a little bit of explosiveness out of his stance, and he's strong as hell. But I do feel like you're right about that when you start going that line. That's where I did it too. It's Carter character concerns. Scroncy, a man without a position. Cansey with the arms maybe a little too short for that spot where you don't feel good about that. All these guys you go down the line, Tyree Wilson, not quite to his top end. None of them had the safety of what you do have in Devin Witherspoon, but that lack of safety is the part where you ding them for that, Brendan. You go, hey, I got to pull you down a little bit of a notch because this is a question mark to your game and it is not certain. Then you compare that to Devin, who you don't have those question marks that you're applying to. And that's how you land at the place where now he's the most valuable pick in that spot, even if you might like a little bit more of the Tyree Wilson better, because you got to bring all the factors into play in your consideration.
The Skyline. Thank you for the $10. Thanks for your coverage this year, Brendan. Enjoyed every second. Well, thank you, Skyline. I appreciate that.
Appreciate you, man. Very kind of you.
Chris Dunn, thank you for the $4.99. While they didn't get their most important positions of need, they did get better today, which is all I wanted to see. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks, man. Well said, Chris. And he puts it well here, I think. You're better today than you were when you started the day, and you didn't swing and miss. We know that.
Yeah, and that is something that I think is really important here. This was a pure BPA draft, in my opinion. I believe that Witherspoon was the number 1 player on the board when we picked at 5, and I believe that JSN was our number 1 player when we picked at 20. He wasn't my BPA, but he was their BPA. That's
Agreed.
what matters.
That's right. 100% agreed.
Wu-Tang Financial, thank you for the $4.99. Levis throwing to this secondary twice a year. Bring it on.
Bring it on, Woo.
Yeah. Obviously, things are not great in the Levis camp right now, but I'm going to continue to say I'm a believer in him. I believe in Levis. I think he's going to be a very good pro.
Second round, man. I mean, it's a whole nother flavor when you're talking about taking a risk on him there than the first. Sign me up. Likewise.
Let's see here. Jeffrey O'Kelly, thank you for the $5. How do you feel about trading our second round pick and our second next year for Davis from Philadelphia since they have Cox and now Carter? I don't think they would do it.
No, remember, Jeffrey, they lost Javon Hargrave this offseason. So Fletcher comes in there. Davis moves up to kind of into the Hargrave spot, and then, Carter becomes the insurance policy for Davis's lack of development next to Fletcher Cox, on top of the fact Fletcher Cox is older than dirt. So you're not going to want to run him out there a whole bunch of snaps either. So you got to have a rotation. They've always run a rotation there in Philadelphia. That's part of why it's such a good strength. They'll continue to do so moving forward. I like what you're thinking about. I'll tell you this. I am open to, if the organization wants to take a future 3rd round pick next year and one of their 5th round picks this year, or one of their 4th round picks this year with the 3rd next year, and move up to get a 2nd if they can, because as you just talked about, the cost doesn't seem to be great to move up. To go up and move up into the 2nd round, to get it to secure down a couple of defensive tackles in the 2nd round, or 3-4 defensive end, just strengthen that up in that way to kind of tactically approach it that way tomorrow. I would love to see that if they were to take that route. I don't think it's likely to happen, but I do like that part of Jeffrey, that idea of maybe doing something like that.
Yeah. John today did stress the point that one of their goals tomorrow is to gain more picks in day 2. Now, we probably shouldn't believe anything that he says, but I do believe that there might be an interest in gathering another day 2 pick tomorrow.
I'd love to see it, man. I would love to see if they did, because this is the honey spot for me in this draft in a lot of ways.
Seahawks 02, thank you for the $1.99 and the disturbing profile picture. I'm pretty sure that's Patrick from Reverse. That's got to be what it is, right?
I think so.
All right. DB 89, then TL 16, then DK, now JSN, all 4 years apart. Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right. I mean, Doug Baldwin was undrafted, so that one hits a little differently. But yeah, you're right.
that is right. Wait a second, old wasn't Dougie was 2011, wasn't he?
And then Lockett was 2015, 4 years later. DK 2019, 4 years
Oh,
later. Now
okay,
JSN 2023, 4 years later.
okay. Years are going by
Ascending
fast.
draft value too, because Baldwin undrafted, Lockett third round, DK second round, JSN
Yeah,
first round.
we just keep putting more into it.
I guess. I mean, hopefully it works out. I do think he'll be productive in the pros. I'll say that at least. We'll come out of this saying, hey, we got a really good slot receiver out of this. And you'd have to, like, in a few years from now, I think you'd have to pick nits to actually say, oh, that was a bad pick. You'd have to be one of those that's like, yeah, but I would have rather had Brian Bresee, who ended up being a really good defensive lineman for the Saints.
Agreed. This kid's going to be productive. He's going to put up catches. He's going to move the chains. Whether he gets to star quality or not, who knows on that, but he will be productive and he's not going to be a bust.
Fun P, thank you for the $4.99. What are the best defensive tackles left in the draft we can get with our second round picks? All right, I'm looking here. I have Keanu Benton, and he's really the only nose tackle left that you can get that should be a day one starter. So kind of imperative we get him, I think.
Yes, it is.
And I think Adi Adi is probably the next defensive lineman that I like, even though he's not a defensive lineman. I think that's where he ends up in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would go with probably Tuli Tupuotu, although I don't think he's going to fit in a 3-4. And then I have like Keon White and Siaki Ika. It does dry up quickly, unfortunately. Colby Wooden's nice.
He's nice. It's hard in the second round, Fun because like Brendan said, for me on my grades, it's few and far between. It is Mozzie Smith, Adewari, Keon White, and maybe Derek Hall if you think you can kick him inside, though it's less certain than those other guys. Third round, Zach Pickens, Colby Wooden. That's it for me on the third round. And then, yeah, you got Gervon Dexter, Jared Clark, Dante Still, Saiki Ika in the fourth round for me would be kind of the 2, 3, 4s on that. But tomorrow specifically, Ben Adewari, Keon White, that's really to look at that second round pick as guys they could really kind of lock in on. And I know they met with Pickens. So that's a guy in the third round to take a look at, especially if he slides that far.
Yeah. So, I think that's really all that can be said about day one in terms of like the macro breaking into it. Some hearts got broken with those last few picks because you saw Brian Bresee. Some people were like, oh, we might get Bresee at 37. People were getting really excited. And then Miles Murphy went off, Mozzie Smith, Nolan Smith, and Felix. Felix was a personal favorite of mine, by the way. Really like that guy.
It's a good player. It's a good pick by the Chiefs.
But that was really about all she wrote in the first round. And I'm coming away from it feeling pretty good. I'm not fist pumping, but I'm happy with the way things went overall. I think it could have been a little bit better, but I see the approach. It is a clear approach of best player available, no matter what. And that is why, some of the people who were unhappy with this pick, I saw this comment a lot in my chat, people saying, Pete and John always do this. Pete and John always mess up the draft just like this. And I'm like, no, this is the exact opposite of how Pete and John usually mess up the draft. Even if they did mess it up, this is the exact opposite of what they have done typically.
Agreed 100%. And that's why I support it, even if you and I find ourselves, I think, in the same area here where we support it. It's like a B area that we find ourselves in, right? Not to take you go, okay, I give it a B. But as I said on that front side of it is that you and I have been both that pushed for this before last year's draft. And we had discussions about, we know what's gone wrong. You and I have pulled it apart. What we've seen and what we've seen over and over again is us driving for need. Not in one draft, not in 2 drafts, not in 3 drafts, but all of these drafts basically from 2015 onwards, we kept coming back to realizing need was coming back and pushing the day more than value was. And that was leading to failure and horrific failures in drafts year after year after year. And so last year you had this great draft because you let value drive the day and it gave you one of the most historic drafts of all time. They're doing that again this year. They're just not to the quite results of what sends us, to the sky as far as feeling how we want to feel about it. But
Mm.
that's okay. Doesn't mean that the process is broken or isn't cogent or intelligent. And I think it's all of that here. And so I will support it because of that, because I want to see that beyond the players you get that are that's my guy I want you to get. I want you to get my guy. Beyond that, I want him to have a philosophy that's smart and repeatable in its success.
Yeah, last year, BPA just so happened to coincide really well with needs. This year, it's not quite happening that way, but
Right.
I cannot fault the team for sticking with that philosophy.
It's a great way of putting it.
So, going into day 2 tomorrow, real quick, some of the highlights. Levis still on the board, very appealing at 37 to me. The value is off the charts. I still have a couple of guys who I viewed as mid first rounders on my board. I have Brian Branch and Joey Porter Jr. Not that I really want to take either that badly because we already took a corner, but I like them. And Trenton Simpson, Darnell Washington, Keely, not Keely Ringo anymore, but a guy like a Drew Sanders, a guy like Keanu Benton, Diane Henley. Some really appealing options remain. Who are some of the guys that you're really keeping an eye on?
Yeah, certainly. We talked about Keanu Benton, Keon White, Otta Warrior, the three guys, because we do have that defensive end need. Henley, Simpson, Sanders, 3 middle linebackers that are going to go in the second round. Are one of them going to be the Seahawks? I think there's a good chance one of them ends up being just that. Offensively speaking, if you wanted to look at maybe Cody Mock is a guy that if they're looking at offensive line address, obviously we've got the centers being Wilper and John Michael Schmitz that'll be in play, and maybe even Tipman as well. You can add into that list as far as guys that I think are definitely in play for us when we're talking about looking at the offensive line. I don't see any other kind of guys that I would point to or think that there would be on offense outside of that. Obviously, if the team wanted to make a move, Darnell Washington is there. If you wanted to make a Fant move, he has slid now into the second round. So that is another guy that maybe there's a chance.
Yeah, this passing attack in 2023, if you got 3 really awesome receivers and Darnell Washington as your top pass catchers, that's getting up there potentially. That could be one of the best offenses in the league.
It really could. And the one thing it would do as well, Brendan, is they've not with not being able to trade back out of 5 and not being able to trade it back at 20, we still haven't solved that issue of the negative $3 million balance that we have on our books. That still does remain.
Maybe if push comes to shove, we are going to restructure Lockett at the buzzer. If like nothing else manifests. I mean, because here's the thing, restructuring doesn't put money, doesn't add like void years. It's different, right? It just increases a cap hit the next year, which, Jody's still going to own the team next year. It's not like she's going to be like it shouldn't be that big of a deal. It shouldn't be.
I agree with you. To me, it just seems like you don't have any other ways to really go here. You've already cut down the salary in the places you can. There's no other places to cut. And you haven't done the restructuring with anybody else. So there should be an opening to be able to do 1 or 2. It should just take 1 restructure and you're good. It's not like you got to move all these contracts all over the board like you're the Saints every year. Just get 1 done and you'll be fine with it. So,
All right. So I think that's pretty conclusive here. The only other thing that really happened today that was like notable, I think, was the fact that the Seahawks went to the buzzer on both of their picks inside 30 seconds left, which tells me, I don't know if you agree with this, it tells me we really wanted to trade down and nothing manifested.
100% agree with it. We see it as we mentioned with these other picks as well, that the value's not been on these other picks. It's the nature of this beast in recent drafts. I think we had do we have any moves last year in the first round? Didn't it seem like everybody just picked natively last year in their first round selection?
Yeah.
And it's GMs don't want to give up the moon to go up. And you know what, Brandon, let's also acknowledge, look at the trades last year. Broncos giving up future picks, Rams giving up future picks, the Saints giving up future picks. This burned out a lot of teams. All 3 of those teams got burned by making those deals in certain respects. Maybe not the Rams because they'll take their Super Bowl title, but they give a top 6 pick to the Detroit Lions. And so that doesn't look good in retrospect as far as if you're looking for a certain way this is going league wide, that teams are maybe hitting the brakes a little bit going, I don't want to be like this. I don't want to be looked at like the Saints, like I just got took. Oh, that's got to burn when that happens.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I want to say I love it, because we didn't force the trade down. The trade down didn't manifest, and they were just like, okay, I guess we're just going to use the pick then. They didn't do what they did 4 years ago when they were so desperate to trade down. They just took whatever offer that was out there.
That's right.
And I love it. I love
I
it.
love it too. I love it too. I'm okay with the philosophy is right and what they're going at's right. It may not be getting the end result exactly in line to where I'd love to see, but that's doesn't mean that the process isn't correct.
Right. Okay, so that's really about all we got. We've gone for about an hour and 15 minutes. I think that's pretty good. We made two picks that I do think are going to make a significant impact on the 2023 Seahawks and many Seahawks teams after that. So can't complain about it. Tomorrow we got 3 picks. We are concluding our business with Russell Wilson once and for all when we pick at 37. And then we've got 2 more picks after that. So should be fun, should be exciting. Many opportunities to make the team better. I want to thank everybody for hanging out with us tonight. It is very late. We still got 600 people in the stream.
Woo! Let's go.
And me and the Hawks Nest will both be streaming day 2 tomorrow, I believe, 4 o'clock Pacific.
We'll be rolling.
And we will do another after show afterwards. So we are putting in the time, but so far, I'd say it's been very worth it.
Has been worth it. It's been a successful, even if it's a moderate success, it's still a success. Even if it's just a little bit of forward, it is forward and not backwards. And that's where this team's going right now with the 8 picks remaining on the board in this upcoming draft. So even if you're a little bit lukewarm on some of these picks, even if you're not quite on board, understand the work's not done yet. Let's look at it in total and make our final assessment at that point about where this stands. But they're at least taking steps forward, even if they are just small steps. They are going forward here.
Yeah. Yeah, I personally have a little bit of a theory that because of the situation with Jody Allen, the team is not going completely all out trying to just win the Super Bowl now, and is just trying to accumulate as much talent as possible. And they're like, oh, okay, we'll figure out the rest when we actually have a long-term owner.
Makes sense. And I think that could definitely be something that's is the way the situation is rolling right now. It completely adds up.
Yeah, and it is what it is. I'm not thrilled about the fact that we have this owner situation that I think is probably holding the team back a little bit, but it is what it is.
It's not permanent, and though it does make it a little bit harder, it doesn't mean it's impossible to get over the top on things.
Real quick here, I think I missed the super chat. Daniel Bailey, thank you for the $2. At the end of the day, the team got better today. I don't think anybody can argue that.
And for those folks that are naysay, let's just take this last 2 drafts of guys that we've selected that we can, I think unequivocally, even if you're the most ardent anti-person of this draft, I think you would say this. Last year, you got the best left tackle in the draft. You got the best right tackle in that draft. You got arguably the best running back in that draft. You got the best cornerback in that draft. You can miss me with that Sauce Gardner talk. You got the best cornerback in last year's draft. Now, to start this year's draft with your first 2 picks, unequivocally, almost if you went to every NFL team and you took a poll, you got you would have the majority of decisions saying you just walked away in this draft with the best cornerback and the best wide receiver. So you're starting to stack these drafts up in that way. That's going to build a strong team down the line, in my opinion. Not in itself, but to me, I can see where that comes together.
Jason, thank you for the 220. When are you 2 doing streams tomorrow? I think we're both starting right around 4 p.m. Pacific.
Yeah, so I'll be on, I imagine on 3:30. I'll be probably starting a little bit beforehand. And then we'll go as late as we kind of go on my side. And then me and Brendan I imagine Brendan will be around again, probably in this late frame of it tomorrow that we'll be going after I stop though.
Right. And to those of you out there who are night owls, you can actually follow me over to Twitch. I should be going live over there in like a little less than half an hour. Brand new, hot off the presses, just released 2.5 hours ago. Star Wars Jedi Survivor just came out. I will be giving it a try for a couple hours tonight before I head off to bed. So hope to see you there.
Are you turning the dark side? Or are you going light? Are you going to stay Jedi? Or are you going to go Sith?
It depends on what's more fun, right?
Bit of both.
Yeah.
Bit of both. Draw the darkness just as far as you can so you can still stay light. So you push it right up to the line and then
I like it. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I'll be giving that a spin for a couple of hours tonight. And again, thank you for coming out. And hey, it was a productive first day. Wasn't everything that some people wanted, but maybe it was what we needed. And there's still a lot more to come. Still 8 picks left in this draft. Still 8 opportunities to make this team better now and later. So let's say it. Let's say it one more time.
Let them know.
Gotta say it. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.